Hi everyone, and welcome to the webinar, How to Take the Next Step in Improving the Business Value of Your Data, Move Your Data Maturity to the Next Level. My name is Tijmen Belen, and I will be the host of this webinar. We've organized this webinar together with Microsoft, and we are really happy with their input on this topic. But before I'm going to introduce today's speaker, I'd first like to give you some basic information about the webinar. You have the possibility to ask questions, and I will monitor them during the webinar. At the end of the webinar, we will have a short Q&A session where we will answer all of these questions. So then I think we're ready, and I'd like to introduce today's speaker, which is Bart Prikker from Devoteam. Bart, welcome. Can you take over and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tom. I hope I'm easy to understand for everyone. A little bit about myself. My name is Bart Prikker. I'm a senior data consultant at Devoteam Netherlands currently. I've been working with the Microsoft stack for multiple years now, about 5 or 6 years. Started on the end in the reporting and then moved to more of a data engineering role. Now I'm currently working as a business analyst for Rabobank. So I have a pretty wide experience from for the ETL from start to finish. This webinar has the following program. We're going to talk a little bit about data, how it's useful for businesses. I've tried to keep it in the middle for people from different roles as well. We're going to talk about a central data pillar, what it is, why you can use it, pragmatic approaches to actually start working on implementing something like that, like a concept, then some references, and then a little bit about how we as a Devoteam can help you achieve a higher level of data maturity. First off, starting with data. Most of you probably already have some kind of data solution, be it on-premise, be it completely in the cloud, maybe a hybrid solution, maybe it's all custom-made software you've developed internally. The goal is the same. Data is currently a major asset to almost every organization. Users from from operations, middle and senior management are constantly requesting information from your reporting department, probably, or wanting to have insights to add value to their business level. Each of them has different requirements, of course. Management probably wants a bit of a more aggregated view. They just want the high-level overview, whereas sometimes on an operational level, information is requested to maybe help some certain processes go faster or work better. It's important for you as a business to understand that data mostly is an objective statement or observation. And this observation is usually transformed into information which can be used in reports or applications. And in this maturity model, it's shown in an easy way, like what level are you at as a business? What level do you want to reach if you want to reach another one? So we're going to talk a little bit about we're going to start from what is your data maturity level? Why is it good to have a higher data maturity level? And what is your data maturity level? And we're also going to talk in this webinar about achieving a higher level of data maturity model. A higher level of data maturity according to this model. Sorry. So next up is a little poll we've set up for all of you. Tijmen,
Yeah,
I think you will...
Yeah, definitely. So we've set up a poll for you. And the question is, what is the current data maturity level of your organization? Is it A, level 0, there's no ownership, security, or any system defined? Is it B, level 1, business and IT leaders start to understand and acknowledge the value? Is it C, level 2, sharing of information takes place between teams, and the level to the information management system is low? Is it D, level 3, information management system is accepted and adopted? Data governance becomes part of every project? Or is it E, level 4, our organization has reached its goal in terms of data management. So I'm going to launch a poll right now, and then you have 20 seconds to fill in your answer. So I'm going to launch the poll now, and then you can answer the question. All right, we're collecting responses. So if everyone wants to fill in their answer, that would be great. So 10 more seconds, and then I'm going to close the poll.
You're on level 4 already. I will be very surprised and impressed. So
all right, Bart. So I'm going to close the poll now. See some answers coming in. So let me close the poll.
Okay.
And then we'll share it. So these are the answers. What is the current data maturity level of your organization? So 33% said level 2, sharing of information takes place between teams. 50% said level 3, information management system is accepted and adopted. And 17% said level 4, organization has reached its data management goal. So that's the poll, Bart.
All right. Thanks.
I'm going to close it, and then you can continue.
Okay, interesting results.
Definitely,
maybe
yeah.
ask a bit more in the Q&A. So I think, do I have to reshare my screen, or is it still visible? Visible. All right. So I'll continue to explain a bit further about what data maturity is. It's according to Gartner, but multiple variations exist when it comes to models like these, of course. But it's good to at least have a baseline. And data maturity is mostly a tool. It shouldn't be a goal in itself, but it's a tool you should use to maximize data utilization. Lately, I think you're all familiar with, for example, the GDPR, rules, laws, and regulations. In my experience, even bigger enterprises still struggle with some of these issues. So when it comes to data deletion, for example, for personal information, sometimes personal information is stored in unstructured data. How will you reference that data? It's pretty hard to do. So we will use this as like a baseline. Improving data maturity will help you leverage your data for maximum benefits, and to actually use that data as a source of potential for forecasting of data, for example. And I will give some examples later on to make it a little bit more concrete and tangible. The common issues for most maturity levels, even if you're below 4, actually, is a lack of governance. Do you really have a good view of who's doing what with your data? What is the frequency the data is accessed? Where is all my data stored? Who's using it for what? These kinds of things get lost because you can build it yourself, of course, in custom scripts and programming, etc. But that's very maintenance heavy. Lack of data lineage is becoming more and more important. Actually knowing, hey, I have this report with these numbers. Where does this data come from? Does it come from the finance department? Does it come from the BI department? Does it come from the data science department? How do they get to that data? That requires a lot of time of asking around, trying to figure out how people came to that data. There's no documentation available. It just swallows up time. Well, not GDPR compliant, I already talked about, and there's not a single source of truth. And the fourth one is actually the one that's the main focal point of creating a centralized data pillar. To create a single source of truth, different departments can use with the objective facts as they should be as a starting point for all their reports. So if I'm at the, well, actually, I'll get to that later. I'm getting ahead of myself. So in the third part, I will talk about creating a central data pillar. It's more of a concept than actually a pre-built template you can roll out, for example. So it can have multiple it can have different forms, different components. So don't hold too tightly on one model or one template, because it might differ for everyone. And what I mean by a central data pillar is one unified data platform where your data is stored and processed, where you can have structured and unstructured data, and you can achieve the data lineage, which allows you to employ data governance, security, and scalability. So what would be the benefits of this? Because most companies already think, well, I have source data, I can use the source data. Why is that not good enough? A lot of issues are actually coming from synchronization issues, for example. So there might be different source systems that either process data daily, then there's another source system that processes data monthly, then there's another source system that processes data in real time. And all of this has to be added together. Common things people do, they just create batch processing. They say, all right, well, our maximum length of time is a week. So we'll wait 1 week until we have everything. Then we run everything, and then we always have the data per week, which is fine if that's your requirement, but it hampers your flexibility, of course. And the main goal of creating a central data pillar is to remove errors in manual input, harmonize different raw sources for the operational data, and to move to a more modern data lakehouse, which easily allows you to create a single source of the truth. But at the same time, also allow the different departments that you're working with to have the same answers, but create their own stuff. To achieve this, you can either do this with data modeling, of course. That has a lot of different approaches, Data Vault 2.0, Kimball, Data Mart. But I won't go too much into detail about that. Of course, if you have questions about that, feel free to ask them at the end. I like talking about it. But I can summarize everything I just said by keeping it pretty simple. As a business, you need a single version of the truth and a single version of the facts. So if you have multiple regions with multiple stores, if one department is querying the total sales for the Benelux area, then it shouldn't matter if that's being queried from the data science department, the finance department, or the BI department. They should come to the same results. And that's what we want to achieve with that single source of truth. A lot of companies see moving towards a centralized data pillar as a really big monumental step. You have a lot of legacy systems, you have a lot of legacy ETL processes, and it's pretty difficult to harmonize those. But it's actually a lot easier than people think to start with it. I will show you some examples later on how to do that, actually. And I am focusing mostly on doing this on the Azure platform, because I believe that the increasing amount of data, but the varying needs call for a lot of scalability. So the decoupling of computing and storage, and the Azure platform allows you to do that pretty easily. Where classic on-premise solutions, where all your stuff is still in a rack in your basement, doesn't really help in that. So let's see. Yeah, so just to reiterate, to become more data-driven, it's good to have a single source of truth. So your whole company, all the different departments make choices based on the same truth, and decisions are made about the objective truth. If you have that data pillar, it allows you to create a heart of your business, because the data can not only be used for business intelligence reports, it can also be used for applications later on. It can be used for auditing. You can make it as big or as small as you want. And it allows you to have a flexible, scalable heart for any solutions you want to develop later on. Sometimes what I've seen at businesses is they've built something that works pretty nice, but they haven't thought about the future enough. And then they've invested millions into a solution, and now they want to do machine learning. They only have a classic data warehouse. Performance is extremely low. They have to rebuild everything, and they just scrap it. which is a shame. Understandable, but also a shame. So it's good to think about those kinds of things early on in project. If you're thinking about moving to the cloud, migrating, or even moving certain applications or databases to the cloud. Yeah, it would be a shame if not thinking about it hampers the way you can leverage the data to improve your business. So enough about that. I've talked about data governance and security a little bit, data lineage. And as I said, I'm focusing on the Azure platform. So you'll mostly see Azure tools or technologies in there, however you want to call it, solutions. And the first one I will start with is Azure Purview. In this overview on the left, where you see on-premise, cloud, and SaaS applications, you can see that as like the sourcing area. So that's where all your source data is coming from, which will, in traditional ways, would move to SQL Server or other databases, even the Azure Cloud SQL. And this is kind of like a big. You can see it as kind of a helicopter that looks at from start to finish. Like, hey, I have these tables with these rows. Where do they come from? What kind of data is it? Is it sensitive information? Is it personal information? Is it extremely sensitive information? Is it public information? And it allows you to attach something like a flag to it from start to finish. So the moment it comes out of the source, we're assuming here you can't really change the source tables. So that's usually application based or other vendors, whatever. But the moment the data becomes yours, as to say, in your care, you can start controlling it, which is necessary for certain rules, regulations, laws, you name it. And Purview does it with 3 main components, where 2 are actually mostly for like operational stuff and 1 is for insights. And I will go through all 3 of them. So to take a tangible example, you have a customer loyalty system, for example, to decide to which customers you should give a discount, loyal customers or customers that haven't been there for a long time. This includes personal data, of course. Say you have that in your whole chain, so it comes from your CRM system all the way into your Power BI reports. That's a whole chain that goes from A to Z. If that customer would now say, hey, I want you to remove all my data. In a lot of companies, this will not be possible unless it's done manually by name, etc., checking all the tables, writing custom SQL queries for it, creating custom software to do it. Whereas this allows you to map that kind of data from the start and allows you to delete and manage it or even obfuscate it from one single point. So you don't have to go through each and every table, each and every store procedure to check it out to make sure you didn't miss anything. To make it a little bit more visual, I've added this picture when it comes to data mapping. A lot of times when you're busy with data projects, a lot of questions come from, hey, where is my data coming from? How is it built up? What are the source systems? Documentation is built by someone 12 years ago when you started out. Upgrades and updates were being done, and it's not up to date anymore. And if you start with Azure Purview, you can see here they have multiple data centers. Well, that's not always the case, of course, but you can also just use it from different sources. And it really allows you to go into detail from every source, like, hey, where is it coming from? What's the frequency? How is it configured? What's it used for? You can write some accompanying text about it. And all the data will be mapped automatically if it's loaded in. So you don't have to automatically assign data to certain sources, for example. It will do that for you, which takes off a lot of administrative queries and work from your engineers. That data mapping is then used to create a data catalog. This falls under data management. Some of you might already be familiar for it, but for those that are not, I will just explain a little bit about what it is. In my previous example, say I want sales from one certain region, and you have different countries, different departments. On a smaller scale, you would ask, hey, do you know where the table is where I can find the revenue of all our stores in Germany? And then that person has to respond, and you have to look it up, and you have to talk to each other, and you might see something weird. And then what usually happens is that person that asks the question about the data source will then copy that data source to their own data solution and start doing stuff with it, creating multiple realities. So you have one table that should actually be used, and then they're like, okay, that's there, nice, I will make my own table, and then there's another table, and you name it, it will go on for a long time. You will create like a spider web of different truths. Where in this data catalog actually allows you to create, employs a search engine as well. You see an overview of the amount of sources, the assets, the tables, the terms that are being used. So what is a contract, for example? What is a loan agreement? What is an underwriting agreement? What are the columns that are always needed when you have a contract that makes it unique, for example? That's all possible in the data catalog part of Purview, and also with the data mapping that's done automatically. You can either run it as soon as you load in new data, or you can run it retroactively. You can employ it in the pipelines. You can modify it however you want, whatever your business needs are. So that's pretty nice, because creating this documentation is most of the times it's something that's at the bottom of the list. And it is something you need if you want to create a single source of truth, because it allows you to just say, hey, I'm managing my data. This is in this example, the tax revenue table. That's the one you should use, instead of manually asking people or looking at outdated documentation. And the user interface makes it pretty easy to use as well. Then the next one is more for people on the back end part. This just shows you reports over the stuff you have within Azure Purview. So you can see if what most of your data is. In the bottom, you can see something that's labeled financial, personal, government. But you can completely configure that yourself. You can get more insights about your data, which might be interesting for some reports. It might not be, but it's useful tool to have. So you don't have to write custom reporting over the metadata you receive from Purview. Sorry, one last thing to say. So what Purview doesn't do is copy the data again. So you would have double the storage. The only thing that Purview does is it takes the data from metadata tables. So the metadata tables contain data about what's in the tables, but not the actual data from the tables themselves. It's a bit of a vague explanation, a bit difficult to make concrete, but it basically boils down to that you don't need to double your storage, for example, because you're using Purview, which is pretty nice. And this will also show you like what kind of scans with the data mapping failed and why it failed. So that can help you enforce data quality as well. And moving on, excuse me. So with Purview in mind, this image is probably quite familiar for you. The one on the left, at least. About 10, 15 years ago, actually maybe about 10 years ago, the classic systems, what you see on the left, started to get several issues and challenges. First off, they connected both computing power and storage power under peak performance. So that forced companies to pay for the peak performance resources needed. So say a query that run for an hour needed 64 gigabytes of RAM, but the rest of the time it only needed 8. You would still have to pay for that 64 gigs of RAM every time, even though you only utilized it for an hour that month, which is not really nice, of course, and it's kind of like you're overpaying. Also, if you at one point thought I need heaps of data storage, and you bought it, and it was also often underutilized. So not only were the data sets growing rapidly, but more and more data sets were actually becoming unstructured, like video, audio, and text documents, which the classic data warehouses could not store and query at all. So what happened then? Because that couldn't be queried, you see something I put in the middle. It's current modern. A lot of companies are still on the left as well, which is completely fine if you don't have any unstructured data, even though performance is a little bit lower. I'm not trying to say one solution is per definition better than the other, but some high-level solutions like this will allow you to leverage your data in the future more easily instead of being stuck, not being able to do formative data science or machine learning. So what happened in the second generation, you see the current modern in the middle design. Companies started to offload all their raw data into data lakes. If you're not familiar with the concept, normally you have a relational database. So for example, you have as you know, you have a product or product information, orders, you name it, and that's relatable to each other. In the data lake, it was mostly used to offload all the unstructured data, so like audio, video, images, that kind of stuff, but also maybe different formats than SQL databases. So what happened? They offloaded all that data into low-cost storage systems in open file formats, like Parquet, for example. Okay, sorry, I need to use the nice-sounding term. And then they would start the ETL from the data lake. It did allow you to store data at a low cost, even if it wasn't accessed. So the thing I talked about in the classic scenario where you have a lot of storage that you are not actually using was kind of solved with it. But it did create problems with data quality and governance downstream. Well, it not did, it still is, because the most of the companies are in the middle situation, or not even a data lake, but just still in the left one. And then, or it's moving from structure to the data lake, kind of like a parallel way of going. But then, yeah, you would walk into the problem of the data quality and governance, because if it's unstructured, you can't structurally apply governance on data. So what I talked about before, obfuscating personal data or deleting certain kinds of data, enforcing data quality, always having some columns built, for example, that you could never have a customer in a customer table without a customer ID, that kind of stuff. The good part about the middle one with using the open format like Parquet made it easy accessible for machine learning and data science, which you can see in the top one, in the middle one. And the Cloud Data Lake also enabled companies to use the hot and cold storage in Azure, for example, to immensely save costs every month. The ETL and the data warehouse, it might be Snowflake, it might be other technologies from Amazon or Google Cloud, whatever. It's very, this is just a very high level overview. And that this middle, this two-tier data lake warehouse is mostly what I'm seeing now. And sorry. which also allowed you to decouple computing power and storage power. So if you had high computing power but low storage needs, you could configure it that way. If you had high storage needs, low computing power, you could configure it that way, which really allows you the flexibility in costs. But some of the middle architecture, high-level overview, mainly suffers from 4 problems: reliability, stillness, advanced analytics is not the best, and the total cost of ownership. So I'll start with the total cost of ownership. Why is the middle one the most expensive? What usually happens, you pump all the data into the data lake, and you're like, okay, but I still need that data, and you can't query it in the data lake because it is unstructured. So what do? You build a lot of ETL to then move it to a data warehouse again. So you have all your stuff in the data lake, but you also have all your stuff in the data warehouse. So yeah, in some scenarios, companies pay double the storage cost for data copy to a warehouse. And then when it's in a warehouse, it locks it to certain formats like SQL, for example, which is very flexible and pliable, but still limits you for certain programs. Oh, excuse me. Another one of the problems I talked about was reliability. So keeping the you can't see my mouse. Can you, Simon?
Can you move the mouse a little bit? No, we cannot. Yeah, we can see it, by the way. Yeah.
Okay, so let me just try to draw between this. Yes. So keeping, excuse my bad, I'm doing it with the mouse. It won't look the best, but to give a more concrete example. So what happens a lot of time is that the data between the arrows is actually the same data, only then it is put into a structured way, so it can be used for reporting or data science. But that actually means that the data lake is a mirror of the data warehouse. And then in between, usually there's a lot of ETL being built in stored procedures, in Azure Data Factory, Databricks, you name it, that takes up a lot of time and maintainability. It has to be maintained, it has to be checked, it has to be enforced, and that takes up a lot of time and resources. Because with every step you're adding, you're actually adding steps of failure or bugs that reduce data quality. Because there's also subtle differences between the data lake and warehouse engines. Also, you create a problem I talked about before with the batch processing. If you need your data daily, but the way you built it that you can only get it weekly, every step you create here adds time, of course. And if you're really working with big data sets, sometimes it can take days for the batches to be processed. Now, there's smart ways you can figure that out, but then you need a really high level of expertise within your company. And we all know in the current market that's pretty hard to find. There's enough shortness of people already. Not to mention the costs of hiring people like that, and you want to leverage your current engineers for this usually. And then lastly, there's a more limited support for advanced analytics, so in data science, in predictive analytics. So if you want to know which customers you should offer discounts to, then you need to query, unlike BI queries where you only have to extract a small amount of data. If you need to ask questions like these systems need to process very large data sets using very complex non-SQL code. So like in Spark or Python or R. And also reading this data via ODBC connections or JDBC connections is pretty inefficient. So yeah, that's not the best. So let's see. I don't know if I can remove. I hope it's gonna go away. It is not. Sorry, it's the first time I'm working with this. Okay. Yeah, it's gone. So then on the third, in the third one, we have the data lakehouse. I'm moving too fast again, which is a more modern solution. It's not needed for everyone, and for some companies it will be too much to actually implement, because all the steps that you're actually doing in between the data lake and make this red because it looks better. So almost everything you are doing in this, you're just now doing in one layer, which reduces the amount of steps you have to take, and it allows you to get data to reports faster. And it's easier to create a centralized data pillar with only having one single source of the truth, making sure everybody is using the same concepts, the same business terms, the same definitions of data, and to leverage that. Although this is, it's a pretty complex solution, and that you have to make with also high level expertise, but especially if you're working with really big data, it is, in my opinion, the way to go for the future, because instead of querying on the databases and using the metadata about those tables, it's way faster to manipulate and deal with the data. And I will show that in the next slide with an example. So some of the problems I talked about before, like the total cost of ownership, you're not doubling your data storage anymore. You're making less steps in the ETL process, which makes it easier to maintain. The only downside is that it does require some skills and knowledge of some tools that are not very in the market currently. But it is definitely something to look at and to think about the data lakehouse. I highly recommend reading more about it if you have some time. It's very interesting. This is an example architecture with a central data pillar and purview. So this is an image of Microsoft, but it illustrates my point. So on the left side again, here you just have your sources. We're just going to assume we just group them into files and unstructured data. Structured data that's already in tables. We'll ingest this into Data Factory, which is, I mean, this can be replaced by anything. It's more about the concept of ingesting data. Then it can be stored in a data lake. And then that data lake can be either together with Azure Synapse if you're dealing with really big data, or you can even add Databricks to it and create a single layer. And that layer will then talk with Purview, which allows you to map the data, create a catalog in one single pillar and one single resource, which allows you to easily manipulate your data and not have to look at like 40 different tables to make sure the definition of first name or something is the same, which saves up a lot of time. And then what it also allows you to do, it has a connector with Power BI. That allows you to, even in your Power BI reports, to have data lineage, so see where it comes from. And you can use the mapping and the flagging of the security level to secure your reports, your dashboards, and your reports in Power BI as well. And also, if you're building it in this platform like this is completely Azure focused, of course. You also have Azure Active Directory.
Yeah.
Yes, there we go.
I think there was a problem with your mic, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
No
I
worries.
didn't hear anything anymore.
Yep.
So these are just like general Azure components. I won't go too deeply into. They're mostly for DevOps engineers, anyways. And then I will quickly move. I am talking a lot. It's already 40. So let's continue about that. So this is just an example overview, but it doesn't always have to be like DataStitch or Gentoo, or you don't always have to use Synapse or Databricks. This is more like a general overview of how that would look like from an architectural point of view. So what we as Dev team usually do, we try to get we set up a strong data foundation. So what is the data you're using? Where is it coming from? How can that data empower your organization? What kind of data model do we have to create? What kind of security do we need? And do we need to mask any data? And then how will we use that data in the end to help you grow your business or expand your business? And there are some competencies. I will go through these a little bit quickly. This presentation will also be available to all of you that are attending, so you can always read up a little bit more about it. I think either me or Timon will send it, I think. So there are a few steps you have to take. Everything I talked about is really nice, of course, in theory to have. But how do you actually move towards creating that? And that's what I will talk about next. So first in the middle is, of course, creating the cloud native data platform, for which you will need, what is your data strategy? Do you need your data daily? Do you need it weekly? Do you need it monthly? Do you need it real time? How will my architecture look? Can I rely on just an Azure data warehouse in the cloud? Is my on-premise solution still fine? Which I don't think so, because there are certain waivers. I think some SQL Server instances will be depreciated or not supported anymore in some 2025. So it might be time to think about that already. How will I migrate the data, and how will I write different data integration tools or connectors? Also, what I talked about, Purview allows you to leverage. You can leverage Purview to enable your data governance, improve that a lot. You can enforce data quality. Create a data catalog, like I said, which allows you to create a lineage from start to finish, where your data comes from, and the centralized data platform. And this also allows you to secure your data and also make it possible that if you're audited as a company, you are able to prove that you're doing enough about data security to fulfill most auditing needs. It depends on your sector, of course, and the needs are not the same for everyone. So I can take a generic example. Being able to make sure that not everyone can see all the personal information, only people that actually have need for it. Hiding BSNs, that kind of stuff, or not even not saving them, enforcing that. Yeah, so that's something that Purview can really help about. Can really help you with? Sorry. So in the end, what's all this used for? Of course, then you have this nice data pillar. You've migrated your data. You've set up a new architecture. What are you going to do in the end? Well, you can either create self-service BI, so just the reports and the dashboards that you probably all know and familiar with, and those reports will allow you to actually know what's going on in your business. Are you selling certain products a lot? Are you selling certain products not at all? Are you selling certain products in certain areas a lot? That kind of stuff. You will also create an area where data scientists can create models or algorithms or whatever. You can create a playground for them as well. Instead of them having to harass your data engineers, which saves up a lot of their time for actually developing. And then you can actually use that data to create measurable economic benefits for your company. So either improving your sales or reducing costs in certain areas. Real-time analytics is always nice, of course, but it is it's you need to see if it's actually needed. So how do we do this from a technological point of view? I wrote technological here in the meeting, but maybe a better word is like from a solution point of view. So how will I actually approach this? So it doesn't matter if you're actually a consultant or a business owner or information manager. A lot of questions that you also as a consultancy has like, okay, we have a really nice idea. We know what we want, but how do we start? Because there's so much that has to be done. And we try to create a simple step-by-step plan that at least allows you to start. We at Devoteam, we have our own tools and formats for this, of course, if we do this kind of onboarding or if we talk with customers, of course. I haven't put them in here, but always open to talk about them, of course. The first step you should take to start, in my opinion, is determining key values and the high-level requirements. Every company is different and has different priorities, so it's not recommended that you look at another similar company and go like, hey, what are they using? I want that as well. Or I just want a copy of what they've made. Or ask a company, hey, what did you make there? Unless it's really good, of course. But it's mostly really focused on the business itself. So think about how much flexibility and scalability should I have? Do I know what my data consumption is going to be over the next year? Does it have to be available 24/7, or do I only need the data available for 8 hours a day while people are working? Do I have to have full control over my data? Do I have personal information? Do I not have personal information? That's all stuff. What are my costs? Do I have a maximum budget? Do I do I have just a big bag of money that I can use to implement a new platform with? Those are all key values that guide the way in which you should be thinking. And last but not least, of course, the laws and regulations you have to follow, especially in Europe. The laws and regulations are quite strict in some areas, and it's always good to think about that, even if you're starting with a new program, even if you spend a little time on it. Because if you build your whole system and then you have to build in steps in every part of your process to fulfill the laws and regulations, then it becomes quite a pain to do and maintain. Then you have those workshops and you have those sessions, and you think together about your key values and your high-level requirements. Really think about some concrete use cases. Take a tangible example. Talk with different managers, maybe some sales managers, product managers, whatever. Talk about different stuff they want to see. You already know what useful information is, but really talk with a lot of different stakeholders about the importance for your company about certain kinds of data. For some companies, product sales, specific product sales are needed. That granularity, you really need to know I'm selling product A by this quantity. For some companies, it's enough to know my revenue in this region is like this. My total revenue of a product is like this. Try to create a use case like that, or even multiple. That's even better. Rank the values and requirements together, and then with that ranking, you can create must-haves that you really must have, and that's always a very difficult step to do. I understand. But that's also something we as Dev team can help with, because some must-haves can be are not actual must-haves. Then you also need to know, like, hey, what's my data volume in total? What's my data consumption? Do I have total batch processing? So do I have a full load? So if your total data is 2 terabyte and you need to load that every day again, is there a way you can make that incremental? So instead of loading 2 terabyte again and again each day, can you maybe load like 1 gigabyte every day, for example? That would also severely reduce your costs, especially in the cloud platform. If you have that information, you can create a cost estimation. Microsoft has a lot of tools available for yourself as well. We have some tools available as well. They are not set in stone. Of course, I think they can always change. Most of it's the same, but if you really want a good cost estimation, then you should talk with an implementation partner or Microsoft itself. And then you can select an implementation partner to create a plan to build I put a smaller use case here, but with smaller use case, I mean a use case that's doable and has a tangible result. So you don't have to completely migrate all of your stuff to the cloud as well. You can, for example, maybe make one data set and move that one to the cloud, and then scale up later if you like the results. And if not, you can always, like a proof of concept almost. And from a people point of view, because you can think, okay, this is nice. I want to have this. This is future proof. Everything I want to do is possible, but how will I get the people to move with me? So most of the roles you need, I've put them into, I generalized them into 3 roles, which might be a little bit too easy to think about, but it's easy for a general idea. First, I've created, so I've written down some processes that are usually seen in companies when it comes to data. So loading data, translating data, preparing the data for consumption, managing of the environment, the cloud environment, management of the data quality, and create reports. You can all read about this later when we sent the presentation. It boils down to this: you mostly need 3 roles: a data engineer, a cloud/DevOps engineer, a business analyst/BI developer. Most of these roles in their names overlap a lot of times. So you need someone to load your data, translate your data, prepare for consumption, and map the data. You need someone to manage the environment, the background, the infrastructure on the background. That also does maybe data quality and the data security. There will probably be a lot more sub roles within this, but I've created a general overview. And then, of course, you need your business analyst or business BI developer to create the output tables of your solution that can be used to create reports on. And maybe validate your data mapping. So you have some guidelines now. What's next for you? First, it's good to assess your data maturity level again and create insights in the needs of your business. Start with a reasonably small use case that is tangible and concrete. Don't start without a clear idea of what you want to achieve. You can always get more insights after you start, of course, but I would really recommend having a clear goal if you start moving more stuff either to the cloud or to a new way of working. Select an implementation partner that fits your needs. Identify the stakeholders within your company and take them with you throughout the journey to get them involved as well. So don't keep it in one silo, because then you will create it maybe for your own department or for your own bubble, and the rest will feel left out. And then afterwards, develop and test the platform, which will, it's just one line here, but that will take a lot more time, of course. I've put in some of our references, some customers for which we've done projects in the cloud as well. So you can see multiple retailers and manufacturers here as well, like Gal & Gal, Ethos, Oriental, Jumbo. as well as some financial sectors. This is just a random selection of customers to show a little bit about our knowledge and reference material about the kinds of customers we've worked with. And then the next step is saying, hey, we as a Devo team, how can we help in conjunction with Microsoft? We have created an assessment for your company to actually think about, okay, what is my data maturity level? Why is it needed? Basically, sometimes you also don't know what risks you have as a company. And to get an assessment, then we can make an approach, and then we can create an outcome with a report that gives you insights on your data landscape requirements, a roadmap, and recommendations of next steps. And most of the times we can do this in about 4 weeks. So that's an assessment we could do for you to take the next step in your data maturity. This is our general way of working that we do. In the start, Devo team will lead, build, and educate internal employees that you have a learning and supporting role. Then we will do it together to share responsibility and build the platform together. And in the end, we'll hand over the solution to your internal employees or other people, and we'll have a coaching and supporting role when it comes to the data platform. So create milestones for yourselves as a company. Do a data assessment. Create a data strategy if you don't have them. If you don't have it, define use cases. Select the platform, and then start building the platform with your reasonably small use case. Unless you're very sure of what you want, then you can start building in total. Then we have, we're almost at the end.
We're almost at the end, yeah.
Yeah.
We have 5 minutes left, and this is the end of the session. It's the Q&A part. So I don't see any questions coming in, Bart, so I think your storyline was pretty clear. Are there any questions left for Bart right now? Please ask them now, otherwise I'm going to close the session.
Yeah, and if not, and if you think about something later, you have some questions about general areas, or maybe we can give a look to some issues you might be having, feel free to send me an email or as well. It was a lot, I talked about a lot, so I can understand if it still needs to land a little bit as well.
Yeah, and this session is also being recorded, so we're also going to send you the on-demand version of the webinar. And if you then have a few questions left for us, you can always ask them via email as well. So I don't see any questions coming in, so I think we're going to end and finish this webinar today. Yeah, I see no questions. Thanks for the clear presentation. Very insightful. So that's a compliment. Thank you, Alexandra. So yeah, we're going to close the session. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Bart, for your storyline. And as a follow-up, as I said, we're going to send you the on-demand webinar as well. So again, thanks, and I'm going to finish the session.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.